Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the first virtual research community forum hosted by UT Southwestern Medical Center and the Office for Human Research Protections. I am Erica Salzik, the Department Administrator for UT Southwestern's Human Research Protection Program. I will be one of your moderators for this session today. I'm also joined by Jasmine Nobles, Eric Solis, and Joshua Fidua. Today, all sessions, with the exception of the plenary, will be hosted live. Now, before we jump into our keynote session, I'll go over some housekeeping items. First, we would like to encourage you all to connect and network. Please check out our exhibitors. By clicking on the exhibitor tile from the home screen, you will be directed to the site where you will find all of our exhibitors. Each exhibitor has a representative that is available to meet with you and to answer any questions that you may have. You can also connect with other attendees and speakers by clicking on the Connect button. Once you are connected with someone, you are also able to message directly with each other and even video chat if you are able. If you're still not sure how to make this happen, there is a how-to video created. The link for this video can be found in the lunch and break sessions. Next, let's talk about CNE and CIP credits. So if you'd like to claim CIP credits, please send an email to dallasrcf@utsouthwestern.edu with CIP certificates in the subject line after the conclusion of this event. Indicate in the email how many hours you are claiming, and someone from our team will confirm that you were a registered attendee and then issue a certificate. We will provide a certificate for CIP credits through September 30th, 2021. If you're wanting to claim CNEs, we have created a tab on the menu called CNE and CIP credits. There you will find a PDF with all the information you need on how to claim CNEs. And on the third slide, you can locate the URL and a QR code that will take you to a REDCap survey. Once you've completed the survey and click submit, you will have the opportunity to save or print a CNE certificate. Next, I would like to touch on the live feed. The Dallas RCF team has been using the live feed as one of the main ways to communicate information, and we will continue to do so today. And even when the event has ended, please check the live feed periodically for important updates. Presentation slides will be made available once the session has concluded. For pre-recorded sessions, the videos will be available immediately after. Recordings for live sessions will take about 2 to 3 days before they are uploaded. So feel free to revisit the website even after this event has ended. And remember your cadence log information because it will be good for about 3 months. Finally, if you encounter technical issues at any time, you may chat with someone in our Cadence tech support team or email them at support@eventcadence.com. And as usual, if you have any general questions or comments, you may email us at dallasrcf@utsouthwestern.edu. These links are also provided in the support button located at the top of your screen in Cadence. My team here at UT Southwestern would like to thank OHRP again for allowing us this opportunity to host a virtual event during these crazy times. We hope that you all find this event enjoyable and informative. Now, we are going to jump right into our keynote session, so there is no need for you to go anywhere, as we will begin presenting here. Our second keynote session is titled Increasing and Diversifying Clinical Trials, the Yale Model and Our Partnered Approach. Our first speaker is Tisha Johnson, Director of Clinical Research and Deputy Director for Yale School of Medicine. And our second speaker is Reverend Dr. Leroy Perry, Director of Fatherhood Program at New Opportunities, LLC. Again, this presentation is live, and we will cover any questions at the end of the presentation. So please submit your questions in the questions function. If you see a question you like, hit the heart and it will upvote that question. And as moderators, we will be sure to ask it. You are also encouraged to use the messaging feature to converse with others in the session. And again, the slides will be available after this talk is finished by clicking back in on the agenda item. And this recording will be available in 2 or 3 days. So with all of that said, I'm going to turn this over and welcome Tisha and Dr. Leroy Perry.
Thank you so much, Erica and team. It's such a pleasure to be here today and to speak to all of you, even though virtually. I know when we accepted this invitation, we were hoping that we might be able to all meet in person again, but soon. I am honored to talk to you about our partnership at Yale and our program and how we've really looked at the issue of diverse participation in clinical trials and representative participation in trial and access. It's been a journey. So what you're going to see today is more than a decade of work and partnership with Reverend Dr. Perry and his colleagues, our Cultural Ambassadors Program. And he and I both will join and take questions at the end. But please know that this presentation is, I'm presenting on behalf of a very large group of partners and other individuals who have participated in our program at Yale. So I am going to share my screen now. Let me just reduce all of you. Can I just get confirmation that my slides can be seen from our technical team?
They can be seen.
Thank you. So I am going to get started, and then Reverend Dr. Perry and I will take questions at the end of the presentation. So I don't think I need to frame the picture for this audience, but as everyone knows, we are, as a society, and especially here in the US, although our representation is growing broadly in from the population perspective, we have been unable to really think about this issue and tackle this issue in a productive way across all disease areas when it comes to clinical trials and clinical trials participation. Although we have done much better in the COVID trials, where there was a deliberate plan and a deliberate effort to make sure the clinical trials are diverse, that has not been the case across all disease states. And so about a decade ago, we decided to take a very different look at that from this picture at Yale. And in thinking about this, I'm sure this is a version of the slide that you've all seen. There's a couple of others, but thinking about equity, thinking about equality, but thinking, and then from the perspective of full access, we have a long way to go. And although all of our organizations have been very focused on this for years, I think the clinical trial space and thinking about what it truly means to provide full access to diverse populations, considering not only cultural needs, but also needs specifically related to social determinants and other factors that prohibit truly diverse and representative participation in clinical trials has eluded many organizations, and to be honest, did elude ours until about 10 years ago in this partnership. We really sought to understand this problem. We started with some pretty in-depth focus groups across our catchment area, and I'm going to talk about what that looks like in a few minutes so that you have a comparator to think about these same issues in your organization. But basically what we decided to do, we hired a focus group company. We had them really recruit broadly for individuals that would look like our catchment area here at Yale. Our youngest participant was 17, our oldest was 81. Our only exclusion criteria at the time was we did not want someone who had participated in a clinical trial, because we wanted to have truly naive understanding of what we were trying to do at the time. And the focus group specialist in the recruitment looked at making sure we had a broad range of education. So we had, I think, an individual who indicated that they had only completed the 8th grade, and we had individuals who had double PhD. So really that broad range of education. We had a mix, a gender, 50-50 gender mix. We had a mix across all of what we considered to be our catchment, our broad catchment area across the state, looking at different zip codes, different geographies, different reported levels of income, and so on. So as broad a mix as we possibly could have captured in the first 500 participants that we had in this focus group. And we asked that 50% of our participants identify as underrepresented minorities and 50% identify as Caucasians. And what was evident, and they were in groups of 10, and it was not disclosed that individuals were answering questions on behalf of Yale. And it was general questions. How do you think about clinical research? What does clinical research mean? How do you think about clinical research as a part of care? Do you know how drugs get approved? All kinds of just really generic questions without disclosing that individuals were answering the questions on behalf of Yale School of Medicine. And then in the second half of the focus group, it was disclosed that the individuals were answering the questions on behalf of the organization and asked if it changed their opinions. And literally in the entire first 250, not a single person who had identified as underrepresented minority said they would consider research participation, even in a circumstance if it was cancer or some other life-threatening disease, and they were told a clinical trial might provide a potential option for prolonging their life. They said the answer would be no. So we knew we had very, very deep problems with trying to address these issues of full access to clinical trials at Yale. So we went back to the table. We brought in focus group specialists who specialized and were of the populations, specifically our largest minority populations in Connecticut are African American and Hispanic Latino. So we recruited another cohort, taking the advice of those specialists. We had one cohort that had individuals who identified as Black or African American, and one cohort that identified as Hispanic or Latino, Latinx. And we ran another 100 participants in each cohort. And again, the same kind of broad look. And what we did with one difference was in the second half of the focus group, when they said there was no way they would participate in clinical research, we said, you are answering these questions on behalf of the Yale School of Medicine. Tell us how to change this. And so then we were able to have a conversation with these 200 individuals in a very different way. And what they said in the African American Hispanic focus group were the same, that we would not be able to make a change on our own. That the only way that we could truly make a change and have our community buy in and understand this issue with us would be if we had trusted messengers. And so the recommendation from the African American Black focus groups was the church. While they acknowledged that the church might not be perfect, because not everyone goes to church, what they said was, regardless of someone's religious affiliation, what's generally accepted in the community is that religious leaders have the best interests of the community at heart. And so while they might not be perfect in every segment of their community, it would be the best start that we could make, because there would be a general perception that this individual cared about the community. In the Hispanic Latinx, we were given the same option, actually. Church was the top recommended option there, but they also recommended a local organization and advocacy group called Junta for Progressive Action, which was trusted in the community. And as their primary mission, they have programs such as English as second language, job banks, and so on. So we reached out and requested partnership with these communities. In the church community, as you will hear from Reverend Dr. Perry, we started with the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, or AME Zion Churches of Connecticut. And Junta, and I'll share a very personal story, and then I'll move on in the slides. But I reached out to the AME Zion Church largely because I knew that they had a very templated approach to how they thought about their churches and the leadership structure. And we wanted to have a structure to tap into, but also because at the time my uncle was presiding elder of the area. And when I reached out to him, he actually initially said he would do anything for me. And then when I told him that I wanted to talk to him about clinical research, his reaction was, no way, I don't want to be a guinea pig. So it took a lot of convincing, even for my uncle, to get him to the table with ministers and leaders like Reverend Dr. Perry. But where we are now, a decade later, is we're really very focused on this idea of achieving equity, promoting fairness. And we have a lot of lessons learned about how to think about this, not only from our own work, but we're constantly looking at guidance and the work of others. And we really believe that there are some principles that have made our program truly successful, and I'm going to talk about those. But first, I just want to give everyone an idea of who we are so that you can kind of think about some of these lessons in the context of your own organizations. We have a fairly large clinical footprint now. We're one of the largest hospitals in the country. We have several actual locations, delivery networks across the state of Connecticut, and one instance of our EHR, which connects us all, and that'll become important and evident in a few minutes. So in addition to a single EHR across our entire health system and hospital footprint, which includes the multiple delivery networks, it also includes our Yale medicine practice, which is our faculty specialty practice. It includes our Yale Health Center, which is the health center which cares for most of our employees and students across organizations. We have 2 federally qualified health centers that are part of our network, as well as multiple community sites, which are a part of our Community Connect model. And there are approximately 300 of those sites, specifically around the state, as well as within our practice, we have about another 300 specialty practice sites that are all a part of our network. And so essentially our clinical footprint is the same as our EHR footprint, which is the same as our clinical research footprint. These are just some key facts. I won't go through them all, but this is really just so that you can understand and compare organization to organization. One thing that I'm sure is true of all of your organizations, but is even more true with our efforts now, is MyChart and our patient portal have become a really important source for us in thinking about clinical research and how we look at many of our issues, as 55% of our current patient volume actually have a patient portal, and we use it to communicate. This is a very different picture of our organization. So this gives you that all of those specific delivery networks, but as you can see, this is how we think about ourselves. You can see the various locations of the church and our community partners, and we think about ourselves as this integrated map. We're often asked why not more here in this parts of the state, but as you can see from the population totals, our footprint actually really mirrors where people live in our state. This is just also one of the other things for us is the demographics of our community actually do mirror pretty closely the demographics of the US population. And so a lot of what we've seen is that we are a good test bed for how things might look as you roll it out across a broader population. And we've compared notes with many other centers around some of these efforts to ensure that. So our vision has really been to catalyze a sustainable approach to all of these efforts, specifically focused around the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion in clinical trials and in our bidirectional partnership. And we're very heavily focused on this idea that we need to constantly innovate and reinvent ourselves, but in clear and valued partnership with our community, who has the knowledge and really understands the needs of the community, and they bring that voice and energy to the table with all of the work that we're doing in a campaign that we call Help Us Discover. So these are broadly kind of the tenets and the principles of our partnership. In addition to the ambassadors, really it's a co-led program where our ambassadors have the leadership of the program. We try to make sure all of the things that we're doing are very patient-centric. We're very concentrated right now on thinking about how we translate these lessons into the workforce here. But really importantly, from an organizational scale, this comes not only from the bottom up, but from the top down. Our leaders truly do believe in this program. During COVID, if many of you are linked to our CEO of our health system on LinkedIn or any other platform, you might see that she was tweeting out or messaging around the Cultural Ambassadors Program and our commitment to our patients. We hosted, and our health system helped us to host lots of webinars and so on that are part of the partnership. And also our leadership are parts of the instructional program for the minimum hours of training that I'm going to talk about in a little while. So very connected at the highest level of the organization. Everyone sees the value of our partnership. We have this shared governance model. Everything we do, we're trying to look at it not from the point of view of the institution or the researcher or the IRB, but from the point of view of the patients. How do patients think about the things that we're doing? And let's keep them at the center of what we're doing along with our community. And again, I've already talked about this idea of translating some of these lessons now into the workforce, and we have a heavy effort there. But also, we have a huge commitment to measurement and meaningful outcomes. And it's one of the things that our community partners thrive on as well. How are we doing? Where are we now? How can we get better? And we measure literally everything that is a part of the partnership to make sure that all of our investments are paying off in that way, and that we can all know that what we're doing is making a difference. We have a very integrated approach. What you see across the bottom is a series of brochures. These are actually the AME-ZAN's brochures. We have a version of this in English and Spanish. This involves all of our health center leaderships. This is our CEO that I mentioned earlier, Mona Brockstrom, but this is the CEO of our medical practice, Paul Tahiri, president of our hospital, chief clinical officer, our dean. So everyone literally is engaged, and we think about all of our efforts, the EHR efforts that I'm going to talk about in a minute, along with the efforts of the ambassadors, along with the efforts of like our IRB. We're all in this integrated approach to how we message. We also heavily leverage all of our technologies. We have Epic as our EHR, but we also have clinical trials management systems and other things that help us significantly with the measurement of the outcomes of our activities. And we're always thinking about how we can improve from a technology point of view. My chart has been huge for us in this space, and I actually have some slightly updated numbers ahead of this. We have created a research tab, so all of our active therapeutic trials are here. But when we're messaging specifically to underrepresented populations, the ambassadors are helping us to optimize those messages. And we think that these also are ways that we've really transformed and kind of created this digital democratization of trial activity, because the offers for clinical research participation are going directly to the patients. They're not being filtered in any way through a provider that might have a different lens. And what we're finding is the underrepresented populations in our system by population actually have a higher uptake of general our innovations than their majority counterparts in our system. We have this incredible halo effect, which is actually more than 1,000 consents. And when we've looked at the kind of cost per ROI on the cost per qualified participant from the EHR, from an individual who might receive a study offer to an individual who might participate in a clinical trial to ascertain interest, it's about 40 cents per person. To actually, if we calculate that by individual who might have signed an informed consent, it's just under $10 across the board, a little higher for minority participants, around $14. And so when you think about the ROI of an optimized message in the EHR, we really have a high level of confidence that this is a model that really is reaching the populations and helping us to think about research in a different way. I won't go into this in detail, but all of our systems are integrated so that it doesn't add a lot of burden to our organization or to our researchers. By far, the most effective thing that we've done and that came out of the focus groups in our signature program is the Cultural Ambassadors Program, which is this bi-directional partnership with the AME-ZAN Churches of Connecticut and our other community-based partners. And they're very heavily focused on this idea that if the ambassadors trust us, then the community generally trusts us. And so we've been able to go from rates of around 2 to 4%, if we were lucky in our clinical trials, to where the ambassadors are participating in clinical trials and have optimized the strategies. We've had participation rates of minority populations as high as 92%. But in general, across our entire organization, across our entire research, we've gone from that 2% to last year, our rate was around 31% of our total participants came from underrepresented populations. And this is across our entire research portfolio. So it's very clear that it's made a massive difference in our organization. They've also helped us to, again, grow the percentage of new patients, our new patient volume, new patients who come to Yale initially for clinical research. That's about 8%. And we've grown our industry-sponsored research about 950% across this program. This has also led us to a partnership with the FDA Office of Minority Health and Health Equity. Our ambassadors moved quite quickly in COVID from being a research-only focused, heavily research-only focused group to also thinking about COVID. And so we've had just tremendous response from them in helping to transition our organization from a heavily in-person research portfolio to moving quickly and pivoting across the board. What you see down here is actually an ambassador's a part of a brochure that they developed to specifically message about our COVID research. They were instrumental in helping us think about some of the technology. They were instrumental in helping us launch studies where we were the national lead. This is Charles de la Cruz, one of our PIs at Yale, who launched a national COVID study. They helped us in that study specifically to enroll more than 50% of the national population, but fully enroll the study in 7 months. They actively moved from the space of research advocacy to dealing with, once we had approved therapies, to helping us address disparities in access, and then also move quickly and pivoted to vaccine hesitancy. And also hosted many of the events. This is actually at Reverend Dr. Perry's church. This was the messaging around for social media. And so individuals could literally get their shot with our ambassadors at their pop-up clinics, which were hosted by the churches and the partners that are part of our organization. They were very heavily focused involving all of us in this messaging and making sure that we were all showing that we were stepping up and participating in this effort. The other thing, these are just some of my favorite quotes from this, but they were heavily out on social media, heavily engaged locally and in large, not only webinars here in Connecticut to focus on getting the answers, but messaging more broadly in other populations. This is actually from Reverend Perry, Reverend Dr. Perry, one of my favorite quotes, that faith and science had come together. But this is more, it's not just in COVID. We are 10 years, more than 10 years into this partnership. This was actually from our 10th anniversary celebration, which was just prior to COVID, and our Diversity and Innovation Summit with the FDA that was in February, right before we had all shut down. And one of the important tenets that the ambassadors focus on is messaging in the community about understanding that disease really is disproportionately impacting people of color, minority populations, and the only way that we're going to get these answers is if we actually think about clinical research as the vehicle that will get the answers that we need to address these issues of disparities and the social determinants. The ambassadors prioritize their work, and they do this on an annual basis. Generally, you can see these are kind of how our priorities have shifted. We're actually in the prioritization process now, and they're doing a red cap survey to vote on where they go. But we have been very heavily focused in the COVID space and the vaccine space. They've been helping us with hospital surge capacity and issues since before the vaccines were available, focusing on the importance of flu vaccine. They've launched radio shows. It's heavily focused on this idea of awareness. A lot of our activities were in person prior to COVID, but they pivoted quite quickly to help us address it. Even Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton decided it was really important for them to not only be at the forefront, but to volunteer for the COVID vaccine studies so that they could actually have experience and message from the point of view of having participated in the studies. But they've also helped us in making sure that our messages get out broadly to all communities. This has led us, as I mentioned, to this partnership with the FDA Office of Minority Health and Health Equity. This is the MOU for your reference. And I think the key factors has not only been the selection of this group, by the community to make sure that the individuals really are individuals with influence, but this idea of this commitment to education. The ambassadors have a minimum of 40 hours of training, but most of the ambassadors have 200 hours. Reverend Perry and his colleagues who are part of the initial partnership have 300 or more hours of dedicated clinical research training. Many of them also have a community health worker certification. And so they're highly qualified individuals. They understand these ethical issues, and they act as expert consult for our IRB in helping them to determine difficult clinical research activities or understand the community perspective as we're weighing the kinds of research we should do. We've had some incredible lessons learned over the partnership and some big wins, especially in this regulatory space. One of the things that they've been able to do is really this wide range of advice because they're so heavily trained on clinical research. They have had training from the IRB, and so they understand human subjects research protection better than some of our faculty. And they're expressing this, but this with this idea of where would the community, how would the community feel about the specific kind of research that we're launching? How do we make sure that the community interests and needs are represented in the research that we do? And so what we've resulted in is we think we have much better studies. They were really crucial in helping us think about things like research stipends, making sure that we're respectful of all populations, including our homeless populations, but oftentimes challenging us on whether this is research that we should do. And so there are really hard questions that now get asked and not only in our IRB process, but in our research design process, thinking about this might be really interesting science, but is this something we should do? Is this something that the community will embrace? And then also thinking about specific messaging and what we're doing and how it might look to the community. So with that, I'm going to close out. I'm going to ask Reverend Perry to join me and to participate in question and answers. And I hope that you found our journey informative and it might help you along your journey. Erica, are you back or?
Yes, I'm here. I will be happy to ask one of the first questions. Give me one moment. Let me pull up the first one here. It looks like the one that has the most upvote says, at Scottish Rite for Children, we use my chart for standard of care. I'm very interested to know how you were able to incorporate research-specific activities via patient-centered platforms such as MyChart. What were the major barriers and who were the key stakeholders to facilitate?
So I have to say a big thank you to Reverend Perry and the cultural ambassadors for helping us to actually win the argument of utilizing EPIC and our tools for research. In the beginning, we were weighing decisions like, should we be an opt-out or an opt-in institution? We are an opt-out institution. We have been, and since 2014, we've had less than 600 individuals across our entire organization decide to opt out. But as we were having these important leadership discussions, there was a significant concern that our patients, our community would not embrace getting research messages through these kinds of patient-centric tools. So we took the problem to the ambassadors. We had a informed conversation with them. And one of the things, I think it actually might have been Reverend Dr. Perry who said it, but we don't want our invitations filtered through our primary care provider. We don't want to wait for our physician to decide that they should make a clinical trials offer. We are an informed consumer audience, informed patients, and we should get the opportunity directly from the system if we qualify for a study. And then from there, if we choose to have a conversation, speaking to our doctor, speaking to our provider, but the invitation is there and it's asked. And to be frank, it was that very honest feedback directly from our community leaders that got us the power institutionally to have this tool. And then once we had the opening, we took full advantage, having a dedicated research team and making sure that those those study offers were optimized. But I'll ask Dr. Perry if he has any comments, or this is his first opportunity to speak also. So in addition to the question, I'll invite him to share any insights he has from the presentation itself as well. Reverend Perry?
Well, I think that you've done a marvelous job of informing us and our audience to where we are. I would like to let our audience know that you are the glue that has brought us together and that binds us together. And I think that's important, because without the bilateral or bidirectional collaboration, we would still be a distance from where we are now in terms of the number of people that we were able to bring into our research programs, and to the wonderful initiatives that we've started, like the Tom Ficklin Show, the flu clinics that we were able to bring to the churches, the COVID clinics we were able to bring to the community, the newsletter. So I think that, you know, we have a model and a template that the world might benefit from, and we're not done. We're still working to improve our work, and it's been exciting, and it's just getting better, because we're starting to extend our partnerships, and we're looking in multiple directions, as well as trying to find a template where we might be able to help others formulate the kind of template going forward that would be useful in any community, in any culture.
Thank you so much. I have another question for you both. How do you recruit ambassadors / community partners without making them feel like tokens?
So I can speak. So we didn't actually, other than the first phone calls. So I called presiding elder Howard, and I can tell you what he actually. I'll finish my personal story. So the conversation was, you know, I don't think any of us are going to do this, Tisha, but what I will do is I will think about my clergy across the district who are the most open-minded, who would be at least open to hearing you out and then giving you an answer. And I'm going to get them to come to a meeting, but that's it. You know, it's really, this has to be from them. I'm not going to, you know, I don't think we're going to do it, but we will come to a meeting. And it was the same conversation with Junta, the community-based organization, the founding director, who's still a cultural ambassador herself. We had the same conversation, and when they came to the meeting, I joke, and I was smiling a few minutes ago when Reverend Perry said our research program, because that's not what he would have said more than a decade ago when they all came to the meeting. I joke now, the founding director at Junta said she came to the meeting, and it was a lunch meeting, and she said she didn't want to be there. She didn't even want our cookies, which were on the table. But Reverend Perry, maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah, I think that first of all, you'd have to understand who these ambassadors are. Our ambassadors with the AME Zion Church, we're the largest, oldest Black denomination in America. We're the Church of Fred Douglass, Sojourner Truth, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Harriet Tubman. And our mantra has always been liberation and salvation. And so when we were asked to come to the table, we would not be at this table as tokens for anybody. We serve an authority that's even greater than the Yale University health system. So we answer to a higher calling. So our participation here was based on what we discovered at this first meeting that Tisha is talking about, and that is the social determinants of health, the disproportionate number of African Americans who are affected by heart disease, cancer, diabetes, all of these diseases that seemingly were never important or didn't seem to be important to bring to our community. Yet, if you look at the medicine in America, you will note that it had its roots in the antebellum South and in slavery. So when you look at disproportionate folk who didn't have clothes, food, housing, employment, or income, and then you see how their health had been affected then, and you look at now and you see these same disparities. So with Yale, we were able to target, in our collaboration with them, what Tisha was saying earlier in one of the slides is that we sit down every year and we point out the things that we think are important with regards to health in our community. And we target those to work with bringing awareness and research and information and empowerment to our community. So that's why that is so, this partnership is so important.
Thank you for that. I would agree with that. Another question we have says, what strategies work best to unify top level support across your health system?
Keisha Johnson Harris? No.
I think that really when we started this, we had our dean at the time, I went to him with the results of the focus group and I said, I want to try to do something about it. And the one thing that I'll say about our leadership here is there's a high level of interest in innovation, a high level interest in activities that can show result. And so when we went to the leadership, everyone said, let's try it. I think there was as much skepticism with our leadership internally about whether it would work because there had been efforts, community-based efforts in the past that had gone by the wayside. And so when we had that one of the first meetings, it might not have been the first meeting, it might have been the second meeting when there was an agreement that this was enough that the community leaders would come back to the table. What came out very quickly was, and again, I think it might have been Reverend Perry. He was one of the toughest critics. I remember sweating through multiple suits in the first few meetings with them, but it was sort of, this question of what's in it for me and what's in it for you. And so in that conversation, what we talked about was this idea that if we were going to succeed, we would need to measure ourselves. We would need to think about what our goals would be, and then we would need to measure against those. And one of the things that I showed them in terms of what's in it for Yale, I said, pulled up the only data that we could get at the time, because this was before we had fully implemented our clinical trials management system and had really accurate data across our entire clinical trials portfolio, was data from NIH targeted enrollment tables. And what our aspirations were around diversity when we filled those out and applied for NIH grants, and where they were when we closed those NIH grants. And I said, look, we have to fill this table out with every grant we put into the NIH. We have to talk about it. And then we have to talk about why we don't meet those targets. And we don't meet these targets for all of these systemic issues that we found out about in the focus group, some of them having nothing to do with where we are now. Some of it was around this notion of guinea pigs. A lot of it was about trust. Some of it was about our building strategies as an institution and sort of never getting over those. So it was all of these issues that we had to address. And so what we were able to do quickly was come up with these goals. And so I remember one of the ambassadors stating at the early meetings that their goal for the partnership would be to mention the word clinical trial and not have the community have the first thing that they think of as guinea pig. And I think we're 10 years out, we could say that we have a broad part of the community that if we say clinical trials, that will not be their first word. Their first word might be, yeah, I participated in one and here's what happened, or, other kinds of things that they could say. And so what we did was take all of this information to the leadership along with a plan, that we have a group of committed community leaders who have said these are the most important things that they're going to work on. We're not going to try to boil the ocean in the first year of the partnership. We are going to try to just achieve general clinical research awareness. And here's how we would measure that. And here's how we'll measure success. And so in the first few years with the leadership, it was about reporting back that we had achieved many of those goals that we set, because we had a lot of interim goals. And now we're at a point where really the partnership and all of the things that we're doing, it's so valued to the organization. initial principles of the partnership, and one of the frustrations with the community was we would come in, our researchers would come in when they needed participation for a study or a grant. And when the grant was over or the project was over, the partnership was over. And so one of the tenets, the initial tenets of the partnership was our partnership, our focus could not be around a specific study or a specific grant. And so while we might have a lot of resources underpinning from like our CTSA grant or, one of the other foundational large grants, as an organization, everyone sees so much value that even if we had those kind of discussions, the what if discussions, what if the CTSA grant mechanism changed or other things, then where would this partnership be? And literally across our three organizations, our budget comes centrally, our non-grant budget comes from all three partners. A third of our budget comes from our health system. A third of our budget comes from our medical practice, and a third of our budget comes from the dean's office. All three partners have said unanimously, this partnership is so important that not only would we continue it, but we continue to expand it based on the incredible success we've had. So I'd say having that plan was just key to all of that. And Reverend Perry, if you had anything.
Oh yeah, I did have something to say. With regards to what's in it for me, that was really one of my questions. And that question was predicated on my assumption that pharmaceuticals were profiting from research, and that cancer, there was a cure, but there was a cash cow, so let's keep it going. And so one of the things that that in our discussion with that and issues like Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks and IRBs and protections, we decided that all of our ambassadors to be ambassadors, they must have a certain number of hours of training as mandatory. Otherwise, when we get out and we talk to members of our community, we can give out erroneous information, and which is what is probably led to poor applications for those who have sought out to be part of any research study. So we had to dispel all of the myths. And so the training was super important for that. So what we came up with in this, what's in it for me, we decided to call what Yale was doing and what we were doing at Yale, help us to discover. I think that's beautiful. And then to partner with that or to piggyback on that for the community side in particular, our mandate has been and is taking charge of your health. And we can get more African Americans and minority people to look at this in a more serious light. And if the pandemic has taught us nothing, this ought to be a message that we ought to be 24/7, 360 days of the year. If we're going to change the outcomes and the disparity within our communities, and particularly marginalized people and people who have over the years have just been neglected because of the healthcare system or because of the systemic racism in America.
We still have a couple of questions surrounding the ambassadors. So I think on this one, you kind of touched on it a little bit, and that is, what does the research training program for the cultural ambassadors consist of? And do you use Citi or some other platform?
We don't use the Citi training for the cultural ambassadors. We do use it internally, Citi for our human subjects protections program and other things. But one of the things that we really found in the training, and then there's a retraining requirement generally every 2 to 3 years for the ongoing ambassadors, plus any emerging research topic. There's always training around that, but it was really important to be able to answer the questions, which Citi doesn't do. And so the training specifically, as an example, a lot of the training, just to give you some idea, the flavor, we start with what we call Research 101. And in that early training, it's sort of what's drug development look like? Pharmaceutical drug development, device drug development. That's about a 3 to 4 hours of training. And so it's an in-depth consideration of what that looks like, research by phases, kinds of questions. And then we move into some of the human subject protection. And the other thing that's important about the face-to-face is the ambassadors are also getting to know our leadership. So the individuals who have the human subjects research protection training for the ambassadors is between 6 and 8 hours, depending on how many questions we get. But it's, understanding the principles and understanding informed consent, understanding how regulations have changed over the years. And so our human subjects protection training is taught by the director of our HRPP or an IRB chair. And so this way, the ambassadors are also getting to know the individuals who might later call on them for a regulatory consult. And they're having these conversations early, and they're forming a relationship directly with the ambassadors. Another area that I mentioned is there's a research training, because we found that there was in the beginning a lot of confusion understanding kind of the structure of academic centers. Why is it like that residents and students are involved? And does that mean you're getting inferior care if there's a resident or a student engaged? And how does research fit into that? And so that training specifically around what is an academic health center is taught by the CEO of our practice. So again, it's not just about the training and having those leadership individuals answer the questions. It's about making sure that the ambassadors are getting the information and they're seeing the engagement globally of all of the leaders of our organization. Our cancer training is typically taught by the cancer center director, in understanding how cancer research is done. And so it's twofold, and that's not something that we can get from city.
Dr. Perry, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think that the template that we have developed for the training, I did the community health worker certification, which was 35 hours. And it pales in comparison to what I've learned from the Yale training. In fact, we just initiated some young ambassadors who are on the trail. And the reason we brought the young ambassadors on, because we realized that that some of the issues really affect them. Many of the young people who have not taken the vaccine, we were wrestling with how we could message them. And so we decided that, we've missed a valuable part of our team. So we've got college educated AME Zionites who are in training now. And next thing you'll see from us will be TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. But before they get there, they'll have to go through this training, which is valuable. It's valuable because they will be voices in the community that people will listen to, and voices that folk will trust, and the training is just so essential to that happening. I think it can be a template for divinity schools, for colleges, for universities, for colleges across the country, because I think if we can, it's not enough really to just have the trust. You can trust someone who's an idiot, but you really need to trust folk who have the knowledge or information that can save lives and can change the trajectory of healthcare in America. We got another program. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about it, but it's a platform to help, because we realize that there's a disparity on the other side of minority people in the healthcare system across the board, not just doctors and practitioners in that sense, but I mean, coders, LPNs, just folk who deal with health. And so we're working with that, and we're going to start with high school and junior high, and hopefully develop a program using the same template to see whether or not we can encourage them, or at least have them given the opportunity, which I think has been lacking. If you look at our medical schools, the number of Blacks or that graduate from medical schools, particularly in the North, it's just irresponsible. It really is on the part of healthcare. We need to make healthcare look like America, and I think that one of the things we're doing as part of this ambassador program is to work toward that end. So we got a lot of areas that we're working at the same time. And that's why we're growing, and that's why we're learning, and that's why we're developing. And I'm hoping that our template will be a template that others will seek after and use, because I think it's a valid one and one that's worthy of their attention.
I say, Erica, Reverend Perry just mentions he's not sure he should talk about it because we just have a grand overview. So, but the one thing that I wanted to point out with that, again, around that idea of leadership, these conversations that we're having now around our workforce, around our training, our student training, actually came from a conversation that the ambassadors had directly with the dean of our medical school, Nancy Brown, in the wake of George Floyd. She wanted to have a conversation with the ambassadors. She wanted to understand their perspectives and what we should do. And so the ambassador said, we want to concentrate on the next generation and we want to make a difference there. And so now we're partnered around these ideas that came from a meeting with our dean. She's very excited about the program. Very personally engaged in the program. She's actually done the, Reverend Perry mentioned the Ficklin show, the radio show. She's done the radio show with the ambassadors. She's very committed personally to all of these initiatives and seeks out their opinions around these issues, even sought the ambassador's opinion as she was looking at what the new vision for the medical school should be and the new mission. And so I think that speaks to the level of engagement that we have with the leadership. And it all came from or comes from this place. I think everyone in the audience can hear the passion that Reverend Perry brings and that our ambassadors truly add to our research and everything that we're doing. It's the most special part of my job. And it's hard to get through these presentations without him, without smiling so much, thinking about just how far we've come in the short 11 years and where we're going. Really, they're constantly challenging us to rethink the structure within the way we do clinical research, rethink the structures within the IRB. They've had some incredible conversations with our human subjects research protection and our research leadership that's led to, changes in the way that we think about even the review process for initiating studies. So it's just been an incredible journey here at Yale.
Let me just say one more thing. It's interesting that, in organizations to get something done, it has to go through 5 or 6 committees and, it may or may not get done. It has to be approved. But what the ambassadors have found in this program is that sometimes you have to look at what the situation is. So in the situation with COVID, we found ourselves changing the format and direction of how we were acting or serving as ambassadors. So we had town hall meetings with community people. We brought communities together to use their websites and their web pages and our expertise. And we even took it upon ourselves to look at seniors who would, in this instance, be marginalized, who had flip phones and could not get on the internet, could not contact their doctors, and who were just in a strange place. Well, Yale had a pilot program for us ambassadors where we gave 10 tablets to seniors. And for 4 weeks, we worked with them on how to do telemedicine, how to go to the Epic chart, how to get emails, how to get to Facebook and get to Zoom. And that is what will make the difference in what we do, is that we have to look at where the people are, not where we are, but where they are, and meet them at the level that they are. That's a Howard Thurman concept also. And I think that's what makes us unique.
Yes, for sure.
Erica, one of the final points I just wanted to make about that, which is really exciting, that pilot of 10, 4 of those seniors volunteered and participated in the vaccine study. So not only did they, in the pilot, did they get up to speed from a technology aspect, but then they literally went from volunteering and signing up for my chart to do medical visits to, we've got to get activated and we want to participate in the vaccine, in the COVID vaccine trials.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, wow. Well, we still have several questions and a little bit of time left, so I'm just going to keep going. In your experience, what is the biggest challenge for maintaining organizational efficiency with such a large scope of systems, populations, cultural norms, in terms of maintaining a unified patient-centered approach for the Yale model?
I think one of the biggest things is, we have come to the realization, I know it's hard in organizations, but you have to have dedicated resources. So for all of the things that I mentioned, we do have a dedicated, research dedicated EPIC team. I think we're up to maybe about 7 analysts. We started with 3. But we have to have individuals who can be dedicated to the innovation, who can respond to the needs, who can pull data. We present constantly the demographic and health information from the system to our ambassadors so they can stay informed and we can answer their questions with data. So you do need to have dedicated resources. So that's across the across all the EPIC, not just for the ambassadors, but those dedicated analysts. And then we have come to evolve where we have more, I would say, structured leadership within the ambassadors program. Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton serve as the leaders of the AMEs, IAN partners, and we have equivalent leaders on the other programmatic side. So we have a smaller leadership team now that helps to make some decisions, do presentations like this so that we're talking about our model. But it's that having some of those resources and being very specific. Now we've added 2 dedicated senior project managers. You can hear, I think, from Reverend Perry's energy, and he's just one of the ambassadors that we have, that they're constantly, again, like I said, evolving, thinking about ideas. And so we've come to realize as an organization that if we want to see action from all of the ideas and energy that we've activated or helped to activate within the ambassadors, we have to have dedicated project support to them. So we've hired 2 dedicated project managers to them just this year, specifically dedicated to the ambassadors program. And so I think that those are the key pieces. And again, this idea of really measuring everything we do and making sure that what we are doing is making a difference. And if it's not, that we have the data that we can go back and modify it so that we can structure it in a way that will make a difference.
Yeah, we brought Jackie on. She could do a whole hour on what what she's doing for us. We're working her like we've never worked anyone in terms of she has a lot of energy. She doesn't take vacations. she doesn't have an hour when she stops working. It's just she's always thinking. We can call her, and she can help us with technology with regards to like uploading on YouTube and messaging on Facebook and Twitter and TikTok. So, I mean, with the new project managers, we really see some major changes coming, and perhaps one day we can do a show with our new managers after they've been there for a while, because they're going to be doing some incredible work, and that work will also be work that I think will enhance those who are looking to do the work that we're doing greater and even greater.
Excellent. I know that we have still a couple more questions, but I think this is a great question to ask next. And it's, what advice do you have from research what advice do you have for research administrators who would like to implement a similar program, but has run into concerns from the community as she is not a person of color, which has been a hindrance in the past attempts of implementing a said type program in a large urban southern city?
Reverend Perry, do you want to start or would you like me?
Oh, I could definitely take that, but I'll yield to you, Daryl.
I'd say we had a lot of, like I mentioned, when we started this process, we did have a lot of data from the focus groups. And so we had a lot of understanding. We went into this and just thinking about our individuals of color in our community. We had 250 opinions of 250 different people from the first sets of focus groups and added another 200. So before we sat down with the community, we understood general concerns from 450 individuals, people of color in our catchment area. And so we had a lot of that information. And I think we started with that level of not only information, but honesty, where we were, what we had done. And I think when you approach the community with those, I would take the problem back to them and say, look, once you get that trusted group of individuals, say, does it matter to you that our leadership are not individuals of color? And if that's a barrier, you know, we have those very honest conversations with our ambassadors and are able to get their input. And so I'd say, you know, really understanding who your community leaders are and then being able to have very honest conversations with them so that you know that you're moving in a direction that they will support. But you can get the advice from the true the true leader here, Reverend Perry.
Well, I think that that the urgency of any effort is the mandate, and it's what Douglas says. He says, agitate, agitate, agitate. So it's a squeaky wheel that gets the oil. So I would suggest that if you're in a situation where it doesn't look like it's going to work, you just keep on at it. I had this story about the seven up drink, and they said that the first time it didn't work, the second time it didn't. Finally, at the seventh time, he said, having worked and pushed at it, he named it 7-Up. So it was the seventh time. So I'm just saying, just be vigilant and don't give up. Don't give up.
Excellent. Thank you. That is a great way to end. Thank you guys both so much for this really awesome presentation. We do have a few other questions, but I'm going to send them over to you. Hopefully you'll answer them and I'll post them in the live feed to have that available to the audience. We are going to conclude this session. This is the keynote 2, and we look forward to seeing everyone over in the Lunch with OHRP next.
Thank you.